Hello, my extraordinary X-Men fans. It's Jerry Rasco, and today we are together to talk about the X-Men number 7. And yes, at this point, we are still talking about the X-Men, not the Uncanny X-Men, and that is A-okay. This is a interesting issue to go through together. There's a lot of stuff going on here, and I'm very excited to go through it with you. Of course, I always want to remind folks, if you're new here to the channel, please consider subscribing. When you subscribe to the channel, you put yourself automatically into the drawing for free artwork. Yes, that is right. You could win free artwork. No purchase necessary, no shipments. Everything is 100% free to you. All you have to do is be a subscriber and be one of the lucky names chosen at random when we hit 1,000 subscribers. When we hit the 1,000 subscriber mark, we'll be giving away art. And here's what we have to give away. We start with the Amazing Spider-Man. This celebrates the first review series that we have on the channel with the Amazing Spider-Man comics. Of course, this one today, we're going to be talking about the X-Men. So we have a piece of X-Men art. Here's the X-Men in the original school uniform. So this is one that you could win. We also have a third review series on the channel right now, and that is the Incredible Hulk. So we're also reviewing the Incredible Hulk stories and making sure that we're going through those. So we've got an Incredible Hulk piece here that you could win. Now, there are, as of the recording of this video, there are 3 more series that I am prepping, and the artwork is already done. So I'm going to show you that artwork, as it is also going to be available to subscribers when we hit the 1,000 mark. So we've got Captain America. We're going to be looking at that series. We have, of course, the Avengers. This is the original team lineup with Iron Man, Thor, the Hulk, the Wasp, and Ant-Man. And then the last piece we have here is Marvel's first family, where everything started. The Marvel Universe really kicks off with Fantastic Four #1. And, of course, there we have them, the first family, Fantastic Four. So if you click the subscribe button, as I mentioned, you will be put into the running to be a lucky winner of a piece of artwork. So please consider doing it. It helps out the channel a lot. Again, right now as a recording of this video, we are close to we're at 400 subs. So thank you all so much for helping the channel grow. Couldn't do it without you. If you're already subscribed, maybe think about sharing it out to somebody else who might like this content and see if they would subscribe as well. And that will get us to the 1,000 mark even faster. So with all that out of the way, let's head over. Let's take a look at this comic together and let's see what the X-Men are up to. Okay, this is the cover to X-Men number 7, and as you can see, we have a return of the Blob. Let me talk about this first as far as the dates and the time frame. So for me, we're recording and we're reviewing these on a weekly basis, right? So together we review these every week, and it feels like in 7 weeks we've seen Magneto in the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants like 4 times now. And it feels like we just saw the X-Men interacting with the Blob for the first time just a couple weeks ago, which in our time is true. However, let me share some numbers with you. So X-Men number 3, which was the first appearance of the Blob, that came out November 5th, 1963. This issue came out July 24th, 1964, 262 days later. So remember, this is a time when your comics were purchased at grocery stores, pharmacies, convenience stores, sometimes department stores, obviously newsstands, bookstores. We didn't have individual unique comic shops really at that time. So because of that, you might have a reader who was unable to pick up X-Men number 3. And so to them, it's going to seem like the Blob is obviously a new character. For us that have seen and read it, again, even though it feels like on this channel we just saw the Blob a couple weeks ago, it's been 8.5 months since the readers who are picking this up off the newsstand every month have seen the Blob. So this really is a return. It just feels very quick for us because of the schedule that we're working here. I do want to talk about the cover in a couple ways. One, in this particular series, we are getting computer recolored versions of these covers. The rest of the book is all scanned from the original comic, and And that's great, right? I really love that format of being able to see how things looked in 1964 when this comic came out. The ads, the printing, the newsprint, the technology, everything there. But for some reason, they have computer recolored all of the covers in the series so far that we've been looking at. I don't know why. I've speculated that maybe there was a problem with the cover. Maybe it was damaged in a way. I've also speculated one of the practices back then was when comics were unsold, the retailer would tear the cover off and send it back to the distributor who was selling them to the store as proof that they were unable to sell the comic, and they would get a credit towards their next month's order. So sometimes there are a lot of old comics like this that just don't have covers anymore. That's not the case here, because as we see, we'll see in a second as we go in, you can see the inside of the cover. So obviously there was a cover on it. That all said, the computer coloring here is okay. They're doing a little bit of touches with, kind of updating maybe the magenta of Cyclops Blast a little bit. This little gradient on the Toad's hair from this sort of brown to green, which I don't know why. And then the little bit of shading on the Blob. Are things that might have been different on the original cover, but the art is still the same, and they are staying primarily true to the original tone. So the yellow and blue of the X-Men's costume, it was that flat yellow and blue on the original cover. So they are still utilizing, for the most part, the same color palette. In terms of the composition of the cover, it's interesting. I do always like when you have your heroes in peril. If your heroes aren't having to overcome something that potentially seems impossible, then they're not heroes, or they're not as good of a hero. What I mean by that is part of the hero's journey is that they have to overcome seemingly impossible odds. That's what makes them heroic, right? Despite the fact that it doesn't appear they could win, they still give it their valiant effort and then come out victorious. And so we've seen the Blob has had a handle on the team, and it was with the help of Professor Xavier that they were able to overcome him in the previous interaction. So I get it. It's just a little busy here with both the Blob and the X-Men, and then the Brotherhood around kind of watching from this doorway. It's just a very busy cover. But again, I mean, if you had 11 figures to try to work into one single composition, your options are a little limited. So it is what it is. It's not the greatest cover, but it's not bad either, and it gets us into the elements of the story. So we open this up, and again, this is what I'm talking about. So you see the inside of the cover here. So obviously there was a cover on the front. Now, whether somebody wrote on it or drew on it or whatever, it was just sun damaged or something. For whatever reason, they just apparently couldn't use it, or chose not to use that scan of that original cover. We're going to talk about the creative team here. We've got Stan Lee, Jack Kirby, inker Chic Stone, and letterer Art Simic. And so this is the second issue featuring this pairing of Jack Kirby and Chic Stone. Stan Lee obviously was a clear fan of this combination. My good friend and friend of the channel and awesome comic historian Nick Caputo pointed this out, that once Stan saw Chic Stone working over Jack Kirby's pencils, he put the two of them on as many projects together as possible. I really do like this splash page. It's obviously a photo image. You could just have them centered up, but using it in the lens of the camera as like a reflection is a really neat idea. So I think that's really, really good. We are pointing out here, we see Jean Grey in, again, a even different mask, and even different from the cover. So last issue, this new pointed mask that allows her hair to show was debuted, and now we've changed it into more of a domino mask where there's even more hair showing. So whether that's an attempt to just kind of feminize Jean a little more, separate her differently from the boys, I don't know. Just FYI, it doesn't last long. We're going to see a return to the cowl, the total head cowl, pretty quickly. But otherwise, very, very nice splash page. So this is what's happening. again, just a flashback, not a flashback, a little recap of the stories so far. The last few issues, the X-Men and Professor X have been dealing with Magneto and the Brotherhood. So first they kind of stop them, and then Magneto realizes believes he needs some more firepower, I guess, to stop the X-Men. So he has been recruiting. So in the last issue, he tries to recruit the Submariner, which doesn't go well. And as we saw in the cover, it looks like he's going to try to recruit the Blob. Spoilers. The X-Men as well were able to defeat Magneto and the Submariner, and at the end of everything, Xavier proclaimed them to have graduated. And that's what we see there, is that them taking their graduation picture as X-Men and kind of going over things and talking about it. So not only have they graduated as superheroes, but they do mention the fact that they essentially have graduated the equivalency of a prep school. So now they are moving on as adults, which is great. I think it's very interesting how quickly the concept of the school, they moved past it. Instead of keeping them younger for a longer period of time, they want to move right on. It's years. Now, they all stay there. They continue to function out of Xavier's school, but it is years and years before we see more students coming in and a more emphasis again on it being the school. And then that is something that kind of does come back every few years with the X-Men, new classes, new groups of mutants. But that's one of the beauties of the setting, is you can always bring in new characters because it is a school. So that's a great idea. I like this Iceman a lot. As we're seeing, it seems like every issue, we're seeing a more and more refined Iceman. So originally just like a blob of snow, literally like a walking snowman. And now we're seeing things like eyebrows, nose, mouth. We see the shorts underneath. He's clearly becoming more defined, more icy as opposed to snowy. And that is a nice little change there. So let's see. Yes, so Professor Xavier tells them he has to leave, and that he's going to pick someone to be the group leader and essentially function as the de facto headmaster while he's gone. He's got some personal things that he needs to work on. This is a very common trope that we will see throughout the history of the X-Men in this series. Xavier comes in, and then he has to leave for a while for one reason or another. And this is my take on it. Xavier is the very definition of the Deus Ex Machina. So if you're not familiar with that term, what it basically means is it's a get out of jail free card when you're writing a story. It's an object, a person, a technology, a thing, a whatever, that when times get tough, you can always just sort of open up that box and say, here's what saves the day. And so that's what Xavier is. If the X-Men are ever really in trouble, he could always come in and use his vast mental powers to stop people in their tracks, brainwash them. He could turn and erase their memories or literally control them like puppets. So he's so powerful that, again, as I mentioned, the hero's journey, if you want your heroes to struggle against difficult odds and then overcome those odds, the very definition of heroism, you have to get rid of this incredibly powerful safety net that they always have waiting for them. So that's the deal there. The Brotherhood, Magneto has called them to this old ramshackle house, and Mastermind is using his illusion powers to flirt and kind of hit on the Scarlet Witch, who is obviously not interested in the slightest. But I do like where the panel is different. Instead of, sometimes you'll see this for somebody who's doing a flashback, a memory. They've used this sort of wavy line panel to indicate he's using his illusion powers, which I think is very good. Same thing. So first he fixes up the house, then he changes to a different locale, and in the end, again, she is not having any of it. Couple things here to point out on this page, and this is one of the things that does happen a little bit, where I agree. I think the Kirby Chic Stone combination is very nice. I talked about it in the last episode, how Chic Stone's more soft, organic lines, helps soften some of Jack Kirby's more angular approach to art. So I think it's a nice combination. But here's where the Chickstone inks are leaving me, ironically, I'll call it a little flat. And what I mean is the inking here seems very flat, or thin, is that I often use the term. What I mean by that is they're in a realistic setting, and there's very little deep shadows that are part of what helps form the three-dimensionality of a figure or an object when you're drawing them. So, like over here on the right-hand side, we see Magneto, and his helmet is casting a shadow down on his neck. That makes sense. The Toad has a small shadow under his neck. We see nothing like that really over here on this page. There's a little bit of a shadow under the jacket and the leg on Mastermind, but this sort of cape that goes over his coat should be casting shadows onto his body. His arm should be casting shadows onto himself. Same with Scarlet Witch. Her arm could cast a shadow there. This back leg could be shadowed out, and it would just add form and depth to the figures. Same thing here. It's just very open. In my mind, if you took the colors out of here, it would very much look like a child's coloring book, where you've left big, wide open spaces for the kiddos to color in. But that's not what I'm looking for here. I want depth. I want shadow. So we've got, it's not bad here. This panel down at the bottom is much better. Again, you have the shadow under the neck. The top of the helmet is casting a shadow on Magneto's face, under his nose. Even Quicksilver, this leg, as he's coming in through the door, one leg heading back, that's behind him is in shadow. The bottom lower half of this leg is in shadow because it's bent. The light's hitting the top. That's much, much better. I don't know why, but every so often it just feels like Chickstone, as the inker, is really lacking in adding a lot of black areas to the art, except for specific areas. We'll get to that in the next page with the silhouette there, but otherwise it's very odd. Like here, they're all standing around in this room. There's a shadow near the window, but there's no other shadows. None of the furniture has shadows around it. None of their feet have shadows around them. So they don't feel grounded on the space. Everything is floating. And that's one of the things that happens. The best shadow we have, there's this whatever pot thing that's on the floor that Magneto throws at Mastermind to break up this whatever it is. And it casts a small sort of halfy shadow on the ground. But Mastermind doesn't even cast a shadow on the ground, which is very weird. Last thing I'll say about this page, Magneto's cape disappears. Where does his cape go? It's subtle little things like that sometimes that do kind of bug me about some of this early artwork. It's consistency. I mean, if you're going to draw Magneto in literally the next panel with the cape coming out of the back, why don't you fix it over here? I'm just confused. So that said, they are going to, Magneto has a new plan. Obviously it involves recruiting, somebody else plus some more. We'll see that. And then we see where Xavier has identified and basically said, Scott, you're going to be the new leader. That's what happens. And in doing so, he shows him Cerebro. So I want to talk about this real quick. This is the first appearance of Cerebro. This is Professor X's giant machine that he uses to detect mutants. So that way, anybody, even if you're not a telepath like him, anybody can use this device to locate mutants by their unique brain signatures. This is classic Kirby technology. I mean, look at the crazy angles. I challenge anybody to take this, to pick a spot and trace it and try to figure out what is in front of what and what piece goes behind the others or through some of these twists and turns. It is wild. And you can really see the problem with something like this with this old printing technology. And that is what we've got here are very, very thin lines that are all supposed to be blue, and they all miss. because the registration is off. So very, very quickly, I don't want to spend a ton of time on the printing process. There's plenty of stuff you can research that if you're interested. But basically, in the old school printing process, you would have paper that would go under a printer, and it would run passes of different colors in different percentages, and the colors would mix on top of each other with little dots, and that's what forms the color. So if you want green, you're going to put a layer of yellow dots, and then you're going to put the paper back through and do a layer of blue dots, and when those blue and yellow dots go over the top of each other together, they mix into a green. That's how you're going to do it. So if you don't want something, like in this case, the only blue part here is Cerebro. So if you don't want the whole page to just be colored blue, you have to block off the areas you don't want to be blue and cut out just the areas you do. So they would actually use plastic, acetate sheets, and cut out. It's called color separating. And basically for each color, you would make a sheet that would have a cutout for that color. So when the paper goes under the ink comes down and it only goes through the holes and hits the paper where it's supposed to. So obviously what happened here is the plastic holes and the paper don't quite line up right, and now you get this blue color everywhere but where you want it. So everything is off register. And that's part of the problem. Now today with modern computer coloring and stuff, this would not be as big a deal. But yeah, that must have been torture to try to cut out all those thin little interlocking lines and keep the spaces in between. Really tough job. And it's sad that it just didn't line up. So whether the paper was off a little or the block, that's a word, template, the acetate sheet over the top, blocking everything out, everything was just off just a smidge, and that's what led to this registration error. Unfortunately, but that's the nature of this kind of comic and this kind of older printing quality. So as I said, Xavier says that Scott is going to be both the field leader, and as you can see, the next time the team sees him, he's in Xavier's office in a nice suit and tie because he is acting as both leader and headmaster. And that makes sense because he is probably the guy who would want to be leader the least. He even says, why not Beast or Angel? Angel's more aggressive, Beast is smarter, but Scott has true leadership qualities. I wanted to point this out. So I've mentioned this before. This is a very Jack Kirby trope where he will use these sort of combination of straight and squiggle dark shadows, usually down kind of that center line of a face, to emphasize some form of lighting. It's, again, his own sort of shorthand to represent a lighting effect. Here, it does actually work because we've got a couple of other things that pair with it, and that is the shadows on this side. So the light appears to be coming from the left and then casting a shadow across to his other side. The only thing that doesn't make sense is why this side would be colored lighter. The light isn't coming from this direction, it's coming from this direction. But that's neither here nor there. That's what that shadow references. So, team goes out. Scott stays back and monitors Cerebro and what's happening. And Magneto ends up at the carnival where he feels he can walk around freely. I really like the clown a lot. I'm not sure what it was about it, but, well, for one, I've talked a lot about on the channel where tipping a human head back and drawing that angle looking up from a tipped up head is extremely difficult. It's the hardest angle I think you can use to draw the human face in, and this is done extremely well. The ears are lowered, the nose is much closer to where the eyes are. You see the underneath of that chin and that stretched out kind of long neck. All works well. Great curve of the inside of the mouth there. That is perfect. So this is really, really done well. And I think that's probably just what attracted it to me. But that is a great job there. So we are reintroduced to the Blob, and again, remember it's been 8.5 months since readers have seen the Blob. So we're going to reintroduce him and his powers. So see how once he makes his stand and his feet touch the ground, he can't be moved even by an elephant, and he absorbs a cannonball shot to the gut with no problem. I did go back and look. This version in this issue of the Blob is a little more trim. Normally the Blob is shown, and in the first issue was drawn this way, with a much larger belly. Here, you can see it's not flat. There's definitely, added chubbiness, let's say, to the Blob, but it's not a big protruding stomach like we're used to. So he's actually drawn a little trimmer here, maybe to be a little more muscular than just flat out fat. Yeah, why does Magneto have telepathic powers? So as he goes to talk to the Blob, he uses his mind and can tell that the Blob has a mental block placed on him so that he doesn't know why, but it's so that he doesn't remember the X-Men or where the X-Men are. I don't understand this sudden interest in having Magneto be telepathic the way Xavier is. It doesn't fit with his power set and just doesn't make sense. But obviously it's something. Again, probably doesn't need to be there, but so be it. And we'll see here why, right? So you take away this panel, he just talks to the Blob about being a mutant, and it's fine. I like the Toad hopping over. So of course, Magneto immediately jumps to aggression. The carnival owner is confronting him because the Blob. He's like, "Wait, were you talking to my star attraction here?" And so everybody is reacting, not so much that it's a mutant, but that, hey, this guy's, threw a cage over our boss, and let's get him. And then the Toad bounces over everybody's head. I like the perspective. I like the reaction of the crowd. The pose of the Toad jumping over, I think, is really nice. So the Brotherhood do their best at quelling this carnival revolt, and things get tense even with the Blob because, again, Magneto is so arrogant. This obviously becomes his downfall, and we see this a lot. He did it with Submariner. He jumped to a conclusion, or he said the wrong thing, and then instantly becomes antagonistic towards the guy he's trying to recruit into his evil mutant organization. And he sort of does the same thing with the Blob. It's like, hey, you either join us or else. And the Blob doesn't want to, he's not going to take that kind of answer. He's like, nobody tells me what to do. And then there's this immediately awkward scene of him trying to put him in like a full Nelson hold. It's very odd, very awkward pose. Everything is very weird here. And I don't know why. To me, it would have seemed better if maybe the Blob had grabbed him by that sort of front collar and lifted him. Maybe that could have worked, or something to that effect. This just feels very strange. And then, but I'll say this: Magneto. This is a good use of his powers, right? So the Blob can't move him because he's anchored to the ground. That's the Blob's power. So he uses the pipes underneath the ground to knock the ground loose, and that sends the Blob flying while his feet are still attached to that ground. So that's the limitation of the Blob's powers. And then he hits his head on this wagon and instantly remembers everything. So I thought this was odd. The cannonball to the gut doesn't jog his memory, but bumping into a wagon does. Okie dokie. And then lastly, over here, we've got Scott watching the Cerebro machine, and then it bleeps as Blob. So I like this. There's a list of known hostile mutants. And it seems like, so the only mutants we've seen so far are Magneto and the Brotherhood, and then Unknown and the Blob. So I think that's really funny that they would bother making a list. Somehow Cerebro knows, it can tell from brainwaves who's who, but I just think it's super funny that there's just a list here. And then this is great. So Cerebro picks up the Blob's mental brainwaves, I guess, and I alert Scott. And somehow Scott immediately knows not only is the Blob remembered everything, but that he's also joined Magneto. So somehow, just an alert going wee and a light lighting up, he immediately knows all this. He should not know all this. But again, you have to move the story forward, and we've got to make for allowances. Oh, I forgot. There's one more thing I wanted to mention with Magneto that kind of comes back to here. This is so indicative of these early Magnetos, and this is what happens, it seems like, in every episode or every issue. We see him. He is at like 11 all the time. His eyes are always super huge like this. He's always yelling. He's like, argh. And the reason I bring it up is every time we see him, he's like that. And when you do that with your character, that means there's nowhere to go. So if your character's never calm, you can't bring them to an emotional plateau, right? If your character was always crying and sobbing, it would be really hard to then show when they're really sad, and emphasize that. So Magneto being at 11 all the time just, again, gives us nowhere to go with the character emotionally. Just something to think about if you are an artist and a creator as well. The rest of the X-Men are at this sort of weird jazz club coffee shop, and this is extremely odd. Now, again, this is 1964, so we're going to take that into consideration, but it's super weird. The band looks cool. It's a good, a lot of very unique characters, like great designs for these weird characters, but the Beast is complaining that his shoes hurt, right? Because he's packed his giant mutant feet into shoes. And when everybody sees his shoes, they go crazy. They want to paint them. They want to write poems about them. They decide they're going to start this new cult and call themselves the Barefoot Beats. And immediately Hank is heralded as their leader. It's crazy. Like, this is so weird. And the instant it's time to go, they're like, awesome. So Angel comes in, he's got the message, time to go. Beast jumps out, enough is enough. They are out of there. So that was a super weird little interlude that I don't quite understand, but hey, it is what it is. I do want to talk about over here, there are some, and I'm actually going to blow this up even more. I want to talk about one of my favorite topics. We talk about this all the time on the channel here, and that is tangents. So if you're new, let me explain what I mean by what a tangent is. A tangent is when the outline of two objects in an illustration like this, the outline of two objects line up so perfectly that it is difficult, or it becomes impossible to tell what is in front and what is behind. So you lose a sense of depth on the two-dimensional page because the outline of these two objects lines up so perfectly that it begins to trick the eye in a way we don't want. So here's my example of this. You have Quicksilver and the Scarlet Witch. Quicksilver is obviously in front of her. We can tell this. His leg overlaps her and his arm overlaps her body. That's great. The problem here are these tangents. And what I mean is, you see the curve of her cape. And because it begins to curve down right there, our eye will fill in the gaps and fill in things for us. And our brain does this. You can draw a partial circle with gaps and like a little half circle below. And if I show you quickly, you're going to go circle, because your brain is going to finish that line and shape. It's just part of pattern recognition and what we do overlap as human beings. It's how we navigate the world, right? So what happens is our eye says this is supposed to go like this, and that this line right here could be the back of her cape, or it could be the front of her arm, or it's both at the same time, which means if it's both, we can't tell if one's in front of the other because there aren't enough visual cues like size difference or overlapping to tell us which one's in front of the other. So that's part of the problem right there. Then you have the inside layer of her cape here, and Quicksilver has like these cuffs on his sleeves, and so this line of this cuff matches the line of the inside of her cape, this edge. And so with a quick glance, now we're super zoomed in, you can see it, but if you're zoomed out at normal size and reading this, it almost looks like an inking error. Like it was drawn over and then, whoops, I messed up and kind of left it. But it looks like somebody drew the cape just through his arm. And then the last one is the leg here. So again, the legs are overlapped, and it works down here at the foot level where they're in different angles. But up at the top, you see the front of her leg has a curve, and the back of your leg is kind of going to match that curvature, right? That's, again, what our brain is looking for. You see it here with like Magneto's leg or like her other leg. Well, his leg is essentially the line tricks our brain into feeling like that's the underside of her leg because it's following the same curve and arc of this leg. It's not until you get right down in here that you can see this is the wrinkle where her knee is, where the leg is bent more. But again, this is working as a tangent to flatten out the two, and it's not nearly as clear that Quicksilver's in front. Quicksilver's in front, she's behind. It's more like this. And how can you tell which is which? So that is a little brief synopsis on tangents and what we've seen there. It is something to always avoid when you are drawing because, again, our goal here is to create the illusion of 3 dimensions on a 2-dimensional plane, and these tangents defeat that purpose. So the X-Men return home. Scott's ready to go. He's getting them geared up. Let's go. Magneto and the Brotherhood and the Blob need to be addressed. And so that's what they are doing. I like this Iceman here. He freezes. So he forgets to take his shirt, his shoes, and his socks off, and he goes to instant ice form, and they freeze, crack off, and fall away. This is a pretty common experience that we see later as Iceman becomes even icier. But it's nice to see it here for I think the first time of him kind of icing his clothes to be like, hey, I just kind of freeze my body up and that's my superhero costume. So that's pretty cool. And then we've got this very nice couple of panels here, mostly this one of Beast and Jean running down the hall. The reason I like this, there's a couple of reasons I like this so much. Number one, the perspective. So there's a 1-point perspective pulling our eye back behind them into sort of a funnel shape. And what that does is that emphasizes them coming at us and helps up the energy and sort of the speed that they're moving at. If it was just a regular flat background behind them, it would lack that, again, that image of them coming at us very quickly. And this does a really good job of it. It's also a nice low angle, which also helps to emphasize sort of the power and the speed. We see the ceiling, we see the, looking up at these sort of pedestals with sculptures on them. And then the last thing is the Dutch angle. So Dutch angle is when you take what should be a perfectly flat 90-degree floor wall type scenario and you tilt it. And by tilting it, what that does is, again, creates drama, creates energy, and as they're running, they're leaning the other way opposite of this Dutch angle. Like they have come around a corner so fast that they have to lean into it like a car, like a race car banking on a track. That's how they're moving. So everything screams speed, power, energy, excitement. Great panel. The next one's a little confusing. So what's happened is the Beast is in front and Jean uses her telekinetic powers to lift him up over her because he should have let ladies go first, right? That's the joke. It's not clear. You get it through reading the bubbles, but what's not clear is because Jean's powers are simply visually represented by a little dashed line, which doesn't work. It's not very clear that the beast just didn't jump backwards over her. Later, we will see that her powers do get visually depicted more like we see here with Magneto, where, yes, we use lines and waves and things to show her power affecting things, but it's also accompanied with color, usually like a pink, I think sometimes maybe a light green, something like that. Kind of depends on the colorist at the time. So the X-Men get geared up. They head out. They know where the Blob is, and I guess the rest of the Magneto and everybody, thanks to Cerebro. So they fly out there, and Magneto immediately destroys their helicopter, which is a very classic X-Men trope. They're in a plane, a helicopter, a rocket, or whatever. It begins to break apart, and the team is falling and have to save themselves. There is a amazing sequence. If you haven't seen it, there is the X-Men 97 cartoon series on Disney Plus. One of the early episodes has this exact scenario of the plane that they're in getting destroyed, the X-Men falling and saving themselves, and Cyclops saves himself in an incredibly iconic scenario or iconic scene. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. You can see it on Disney Plus. You could Google that particular scene, Cyclops, X-Men 97, Cyclops falling. Really cool stuff. But it's something we see happen over and over and over to the X-Men for sure. Iceman makes a slide to save everyone, and Angel's like, "Oh, I'm not going to wait." He's got one of the helicopter rotor blades, which that's a pretty serious deal, and he's going to take it at the Blob, which does not work. Right? Blob is not having it. If he can handle cannonballs, this thing is going to do nothing, and now he's got his hands on him. And then the Beast comes in, and now the Blob's got him as well. So everything is going the way that Magneto would expect it to. Jean tries to lift the Blob away from Beast and Angel, and you can see again another example of his feet and how his powers work. So basically, his feet are adhered to the ground, and so instead of lifting him, she's literally pulling the ground up as it's stuck to his feet. A little bit weird on the feet. There's a little piggy toe over there. I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say they didn't just draw 4 toes. This one is weird. It's just this middle toe is like super long. Usually your toes get smaller as they go across, but it is what it is. He's a mutant. He's got a weird physique to begin with. He runs around barefoot all the time. Maybe he's got some janky feet. I do like this a lot. So Magneto and team, they come out of this, I guess, warehouse, whatever it is. So nice perspective as these torpedoes come screaming out at us. Magneto is controlling them magnetically. I like the energy coming out of the door. So this explosion of both the bad guys and the missiles coming out towards the X-Men. I think it's done extremely well. It's one of the few nice widescreen big panels that we've seen. I do just question torpedoes. Why torpedoes? There's no water. So the whole thing about a torpedo, it's a bomb with a little propeller to push it through the water. Magneto is controlling these magnetically, so there is no need for the propellers. It wouldn't push them through the air like a rocket would. So I don't understand why he's using torpedoes. If he had torpedoes, why not just magnetically control the warheads? You don't need the rest of it. So anyway, just a strange thing. Why not just make them missiles? The choice to be specifically torpedoes, again, just seems very strange to me. Iceman is doing his part and gets a little cocky there, and Cyclops has to come to his aid. And this is where most of the time, your superhero teams, your X-Men, Avengers, Fantastic Four, this is when they are at their best, is when they're working in tandem together and they are utilizing their powers together. So, right, Cyclops and Iceman working together. Beast flings some mud in the Blob's face to get him to release him, and now they can he and Angel can continue the fight and not only try to take out the Blob, but also taking out Magneto. So here you can see again, he, like I mentioned, he's magnetically controlling these torpedoes. Why do you need torpedoes? I like this panel. This is really nice. We've seen tons of the Angel in the Danger Room, working on his maneuverability and things of that nature. So this is a really good way to have a lot of things happening, different angles. So we're creating space through different layers of the objects moving towards us, away from us, etc. And there are no real tangents here. The lines are overlapping and crossing in such a way that everything is sort of established as their own layer. So this is a really good way to do that. And again, no background needed, right? We have enough objects in the space. It creates that sense of foreground, middle ground, and background for us. Quicksilver is nobody can get a handle on Quicksilver except for Jean. We've seen her do this a couple of times now in the last few issues, where when Quicksilver's running, she just grabs him, lifts him off the ground, and spins him around. However, Scarlet Witch comes to his aid, and he escapes. Iceman, I like this. Why didn't anybody think of this earlier? Freezes the Blob solid. It just doesn't work for very long because the Blob breaks out. This is where, again, things start to go very wrong. Magneto mentions down here, he wants the X-Men all in one big group, which is great, and Quicksilver has helped to corral them into one big group. But what Magneto doesn't now count on is the Blob is going to get in the way. He's not giving up. And so the whole point was Magneto was going to launch his remaining torpedoes at the X-Men when they were all grouped together to try to blow them up all together. And then the Blob steps in the way. And again, this is where Magneto goes so wrong. He can control the torpedoes. The other team his team is warning him. Mastermind does it. Scarlet Witch does it. Quicksilver does. They're all like, hey, don't throw those torpedoes at the X-Men. The Blob's in the way. And Magneto's like, yeah, I don't care. And that's where maybe he doesn't. And that's fine. He can not care about any of these people. But you got to know, if you don't kill them all, or you don't kill the Blob, you have now lost this ally completely. All he has to do is wait for 2 seconds, and maybe the Blob becomes a permanent member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants along with the rest of the team. But instead, because Magneto's willing to turn on him on a dime and try to blow him up, which fails, now everything has gone wrong and the bad guys have to flee. Because now they're dealing with the X-Men and an angry Blob. So you've turned an ally into an enemy. I do want to say with this explosion, it's pretty good. I would have liked to have seen some more solid blacks on the shadows of the figures to help emphasize how bright this explosion is. It needs more drama for me. One, I could have taken a bigger panel. That would have helped out and really emphasize that explosion. And then the area away from this white, I would have liked to have seen more heavy shadows there. Again, the hatching, so because you have all this energy of the explosion and the hatch lines going around it, this hatching seems to not conflict with it, but if you had solid black shadows here, I think that would really, and then I would do very little of the contour line. I would leave the highlights to help form the figure against the opposite of the shadow. So I would really use positive and negative space to hint at the form that it's so bright you can't see the details in the outline. That's just my 2 cents. Another nice wide panel here of the Blob, like just kind of what the heck? And you can tell he's not happy, and he's got all this shrapnel around him from these torpedoes. So pretty cool image there. And again, Magneto, like I mentioned, all the way at 11. Now, this makes sense. He's incredibly frustrated. He thought his plan was perfect. Everything was going right. And he screws it up at the end. This is where you want that I'm angry up to 11 versus before when he's just like, hey, I know what I'm doing, and talking to his team about a new plan, but he's still screaming like he's again at 11 on the anger range. So this is where you need to be, but he's here all the time, so it doesn't seem special. That's what I'm getting at. Let's see here. Yeah. The rest of the stuff, Magneto and team leave. The X-Men try one more time, like, hey, we would love to have you join the team. And Blob's like, nope, I'm just going to go live my life. Leave me alone. I don't want to deal with any of you people anymore. And who can blame him, right? I did want to point this out. So this is kind of weird in this panel as the Blob is walking off. We have Iceman in the foreground. This is a very strange Iceman. I in my notes, I put, is it Ice Alien or Ice Child? So one of the problems here is, yes, Iceman is shorter than his companions, but not this short. So what I mean by that is, for him to be this short, he would have to be standing in a hole. If Cyclops' feet are here and he's closer to us, his feet should be somewhere down. Maybe Iceman's feet would be somewhere down here. I mean, if you draw out this figure, if he's standing here, his feet would be somewhere way down in here. And again, the ground doesn't necessarily slope that way. We haven't seen anything in any of the other panels or backgrounds that would explain it. So really, he should be much taller, because the closer you are, the bigger you are. Anything that's close is bigger than something that's far, even though they are the same size. So drawing him shorter and smaller defeats the purpose. The other thing I said about Child or Alien is how big and round his head is. I get it. It's a costume. He's got ice on himself, but there's just something about the size of that head in relation to the rest of the body just feels very, again, childlike or alien-like. Remember, if you're a child, the proportions of children are way different than adults. Our head is considerably larger percentage of our overall body size when we are small. We grow into our heads as humans. So here, Iceman's got some growing to do in this particular panel, which is a little weird. Here we go. This is more normal. You can see the difference, right? Here's his head, nose, chin, etc. This is normal. It's not quite as rounded in the back. He's got a little thicker neck. That all works fine compared to this one, right? So you can kind of see the difference. This is a big old, like, lollipop head on a skinny neck compared to down here, which is much more in proportion. And then now they make a joke. Their helicopter's destroyed, so they've got to get a taxi. So there's your laugh to end things up as everything gets wrapped up and we head into the next issue. So that all said, we're going to cut back over to the desk and wrap things up. So that is X-Men number 7. It's a interesting issue for sure. Personally, again, have to remember we are reviewing these weekly, so I'm a little bored with the Magneto and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants through line storylines. But good news is we're going to see something new next week with a new character introduced, so that'll be great. And yeah, I mean, there's some fun action stuff here. There's a lot of stuff that I picked apart, but remember, that's what we do. My job in this particular series is not just to talk about the great stuff, but also to talk about the things that don't work, because we can learn from these great artists that we're reviewing, not just what they do so well, but things that they might not do as well. And that's equally important. So yeah, I think overall it's a good issue. I ranked it a 7 out of 10 for me. And again, remembering that it was 8.5 months between the appearance of the Blob and this reintroduction or return of the Blob. So I think that works pretty well to bring a character back. It's nice to see, that nobody's forgotten about him. Yeah, and then actually what we'll see, it doesn't affect what we're doing here on the channel, but I did want to mention, after this issue of issue number 7, the X-Men then goes from being printed every other month to every month. So it just tells us that the popularity of the book is growing, the readership is growing, the sales are growing. So that's always a good sign that the X-Men are doing well. I hope you enjoyed reviewing this old issue with me. I know there's a lot of folks that probably haven't seen these, so hopefully if this is your first time, it was a fun experience. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please drop comments. I'd love to see what people think about these old comics, and if you agree with any of my takes on them. Of course, don't forget to hit that subscribe so you can be registered to win some free artwork. And then lastly, join us here same time next week for even more X-Men. Thanks.